Hi, my name is Jacob, and I was once a student of Jordan Peterson's. This was almost 6 years ago, and I worked for him for 5 years. Anyways, I told him that it's a bad idea to go through with the biblical lectures because he's not Jewish and he doesn't understand the basic premises of the Bible. So I thought I'd use this opportunity to, address some of my thoughts on it. At the very least, it's going to be a nice opportunity to learn Torah, that is, from a biblical perspective, from a Jewish perspective, because that's really what the Torah is about. Um, for him to use the Bible for his own purposes is nothing short of cultural appropriation, and can't watch his stuff without making commentary myself. So here's a great opportunity. Let's hope this works. I'm gonna put this at double the speed because I just can't stand the guy. Again, a lot of what he's saying, the bastion of free speech for whom? Free speech for a certain group of people like himself, right? The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants in this world who really don't let other people speak. So let's continue. Right? No, no, notice how all the participants, none of them come from a Jewish perspective. All of them come from the Western Eurocentric perspective. So you'll expect an analysis that is fairly Eurocentric and fairly typical. Now, he might deviate from your mainstream Christian interpretations of the Bible, and I'm not going to use the word Old Testament because that is a loaded language. An Old Testament assumes that there is a New Testament, which, as a Jewish person, as a convert, I am opposed of. So let's continue. Ugh. Yeah, that's another thing to to take on and make corrections because ever since working with Peterson, I've had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to study the Torah. As a Jewish person, my full time job is to pray and to study Torah and to do mitzvahs. So it'll be interesting to see if I have any material for that as well. But let's get through this. I don't think we're going to go through the whole thing, but it's worth going through at least minutes. I also had a dream 2, 3 years ago when I still had some hope left for Jordan Peterson. I had a dream that he was in an auditorium and there were sports cars parked outside, and these cars were being revived. And there was a voice that told me that Jordan Peterson was a minion. A minion means a heretic in Judaism, but I didn't really want to go through that interpretation. But more and more, it's looking like it. But let's continue. Um, I would just say not to be so impressed or intimidated by people's credentials. I mean, that is a logical fallacy, the appeal to authority. And just because they have credentials doesn't mean that they really, know the Bible, know the Torah, as the Jews know the Torah, which is. you know, the Torah is a Jewish text after all, and it's culturally grounded in a particular tradition that is not to be taken out and given haphazard meanings. So I've warned him that this would be a dangerous step, and of course, him being him, he'll do what he wants to do, and that's okay. I mean, ancient story is putting it trivially, because the Torah, the Jewish people believe this is the blueprint of creation, right? This is the primeval analog, and to him, it's a book. To him, it's a cultural book, and that comes from tradition of biblical criticism that is common in the West, common in the Protestant tradition of biblical criticism. So that's to be expected, and we'll see if we can make certain corrections as we go. Now, the crisis has been going on for a while, the crisis of marriage, the crisis of relationships. Um, and the crisis of culture, perhaps, is what he is saying. The crisis of, you know, lack of enmeshment between the different races, the lack of harmony between the different races in North America and in Europe, and the shifting global tide. Now, can that be attributed to the Bible and to the Torah? I'm very skeptical of that premise. And plus, the Bible that he is referring to is obviously one grounded in a Christian perspective, and so, well, maybe he's skeptical. We'll see. Yeah. So it more and more seems like he is referring to the appropriate version of the Bible, which is the Christian version of the Bible, or that which is rendered under a Christian frame. So that to me is problematic. Knowing thyself doesn't mean that we should fall prey to a incredibly imperialistic um, religious scheme that was spread through the sword in the Dark Ages in Europe. So this is something to be cautious of. So that's interesting. Although I would like them to define what crisis is. Yeah, I like him. Um, at least he referred to it by its proper name, which is good. I mean, I don't understand why they forgone the mentioning of um, the civil rights revolution, quote unquote, right? These it was based heavily on biblical themes. Martin Luther King based a lot of his talks on the exodus, the fleeing from bondage. And so, is it a deliberate omission, or this is again the problem of having a panel that is homogenous in terms of ethnicity? Not that their views are wrong by dint of their ethnicity. It's just that there are predictable blind spots when it comes to a group of white people talking about a text that doesn't belong to them. Mm, I mean, I can respond to that too, because the construction of halacha, the construction in the Torah, and construction of knowledge ultimately depends on man as well. So even though the Torah has very strict and clear stipulations as to what is right and what is wrong, it still is, it devolves upon man. There's a story about two rabbis having a debate, and for various phenomenon in their environment, such as the bookshelf, and eventually a voice from heaven claiming that one side is correct, and eventually a voice from heaven claiming that one side is correct. But the other side was vehemently against that idea that no, the Torah is not dependent on a heavenly voice, even. The Torah is dependent on human interpretation and analysis. So Dennis Prager himself, yes, he's written many books on the Torah, but on the other hand, he is also a conservative Jew, meaning that he doesn't practice the Torah as an Orthodox Jew does. Um, Now, does that mean what he says is incorrect? I don't think so, but I know that he has certain biases in terms of interpreting the Torah in a neoliberal, conservative, um, and warmongering lens. So we'll see. This just comes from a lack of understanding what defunding the police actually means. When police is grossly overly militarized and often conducts police business with overwhelming force and lethal force at that. In some ways, it needs to be defunded. It's in some ways, well, not completely, but regulated. But obviously, he abides by conservative perspective. It is still ironic to me that he is not a Sabbath observing Jew, as far as I can see, and I think that undermines the credibility of a Jewish, you know, by quite a lot. Not being a orthodoxly observant Jew makes it a problem for him to makes his commitment something of a question. And also notice that he doesn't have a kippah on. Again, it's part of Jewish law, but Dennis Prager, it's okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they continue to mention this idea of the loss of an image or the loss of a context. I would argue that we never had it. The Western civilization never had it. They've always had a Christian version, and the Judaism under Christianity was always censored. The Talmud, until recently, has always been censored. So the practice of Judaism was very dangerous in North America and in Europe, mostly in Europe. And so, have we had those images? I don't think we ever had those images. I think we can rediscover it by integrating some of the perspectives that are not so Eurocentric. Um, and so here, hopefully we'll. Well, at least he's honest. So, so in 2022, I believe he was the tyrant. Jordan Peterson was the tyrant that I had to depart from. There was a whole encounter I had with Jordan Peterson, um, in which I realized that he was quite a charlatan, and that his ideas should no longer govern my own mindset. So it's an ongoing process, yes, and it's correct. It's as Rabbi Nachman says, the stories and the contents of the Bible is one for everyone. Every day, every day we go through Exodus. Not necessarily the tyranny of the outside world, but tyranny of limitations within. Mitzrayim means between the straits, um, for Egypt, and so it's something that we actively have to work towards. I don't see how that follows from God as a narrative or a narrative figure. I don't have much of a problem with what he said, although it is little bit reductionist. His conceptualization of God is ultimately anthropocentric, which is to be expected of Peterson, to be expected of modern man in general, that we tend to conceptualize God in our own image. God is our highest priority, which from a biblical perspective is tremendously problematic because we don't get God has particular stipulations. As one of the previous commentators said, it's something that is not uh, it's somewhat of a passed down understanding, a passed down knowledge. Yes, there is somewhat of a construction in terms of our own priorities, but at the same time, priorities that are listed out in the Torah is quite clear. If you really prioritize writing and history, and whatever, you're still not allowed to violate the Sabbath. And this is something that the Maharal of Prague, the 16th century mystic, the creator of the Golem, pointed out that this is the unique aspect of Judaism is that there is a abstract system of laws that we adhere to, that is independent of our egocentric wills. And this is something that perhaps people and Peterson they have shown a resistance to understanding. That's interesting. I'm just going to pull up the Exodus story from a Jewish perspective using Chabad as a tool. They have the full Hebrew Bible translated with authoritative commentary. Again, something I, admonish Peterson that maybe he should attend to it, but it's not something that he cares particularly about because he's very focused on his own interests, as he's many times. So here, this first verse has to do with a particular intention. Um, the intention of counting them and to show how precious they are. They're likened to the stars, takes us out beyond the horizon and brings in by number and by name. Takes out their hosts by number, all of them he calls by name. So you'll see this counting many times in the Bible, and the sages have compiled and understood from across the text to understand counting as something particularly referring to um, valuation, the valuation of the people of Israel, the care and the concern that the Jewish people are imbued with. Now, can that ethnocentrism be problematic? Certainly can be. But that's, I would argue, from not taking the Bible seriously, because the Bible also admonishes to respect and love the Ger, the stranger, and that includes people who reside amongst us who are not Jewish. So it escapes me why that there's so much religious fervor in terms of killing non-Jews today, Palestinians in particular. Let's have them respond, and then I'll respond some more. Um, I think that's really problematic, even from a biblical perspective, because Joseph was on good terms with Pare, but he was also responsible for enslaving the Egyptian people. And one rabbi, whose name escapes me right now, argues that this was one of the preludes to the Jewish people themselves becoming enslaved, and this be more seen as a warning that if you were to enslave others, you will eventually be enslaved. So it's you despoil, or will eventually, God forbid, come to despoil you. This is a problematic segment, and what he says, I believe, contradicts with the intent of the Bible. Um, the depths of assimilation. I mean, from an Orthodox perspective, America was a place, just from quoting from Chabad rabbis, Chabad Rebbeim, the idea of America is an area of assimilation. It is it is a geography where Judaism becomes high. And so his fawning of the American forefathers is gravely and misplaced. My Rav of blessed memory, Rabbi Shochet, Rabbi David Shochet, he talks about the genocide that goes on, that continues to go on in terms of the assimilation of Uri today. And of course, for Dennis Prager, that would be one of the greatest blessings. Um, all right. So let's continue on the reading here. Jacob were 70 souls, and Joseph was in Egypt. Now were not he and his sons included in the 70. What then does this teach us? Do we not know that he was in Egypt? But this clause comes to inform you of Joseph's righteousness. He, the Joseph who tended their father's flocks, is the same Joseph who was in Egypt, named king, and he retained his righteousness. So again, this is contrary to what Dennis Prager happily said about the great American tradition, because Egypt was seen as a place of impurity, and especially from Ashkenazi Orthodox commentary, it will reflect a kind of antimony to the environment, because Jews were the object of slaughter in a great deal of American society or European history. So, so, contrary to what he said about gratitude, this is probably not a gratitude rather than the preciousness of the Jewish people, as well as the retention of righteousness, even amidst adversity and pressure to reform. I think this is a lot of that is this. There's some very hyperbolic verses which are to be taken literally, like at birth, being fruitful and swarmed and increased. Now here, maybe this will be quite similar to what they said, but not at all, actually. Not at all. I mean, there is an overlap in terms of the new king acted as if he did not know about them. Him here refers to Jacob and to the nation in general. Yeah, his decrees were new. The Torah does not say the king of Egypt died and a new king arose. It implies that the old king was still alive. Only that his had changed and he acted like a new king. In other places like the Talmud Megillah, all kings are somewhat of a representation. They represent God's will because the heart of the king is in the hands of God. So, fine. I mean, his commentary just is rife with, well, at least it's obvious that it comes from a place of not understanding, um, not understanding the intricacies of Jewish law. Now, is slavery prohibited? It wasn't prohibited. Is it undesirable? Well, from a modern perspective, it is undesirable. But the way that slavery was practiced, it's more like indentured servitude, um, and one that is ensured the human rights of the slaves. For example, if the master were to have only one pillow, and this is for a non-Jewish slave, he would have to surrender that to the servant, as well as the need to release the servant if they were to be beaten, if bodily harm were, and um, and at the very minimum, ensuring their food and security and so forth. But these slaves would be treated better than some laborers in today's capitalistic system. Let's do a little bit, one more. It says here, get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them. And it's an expression of preparation and readiness. That is to say, prepare yourself for this. This is the prelude of the um, the Exodus is the archetypal redemption, and according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, it will be the archetype to the ultimate redemption, the redemption towards the Messianic era. The preciousness of those who go into this exile, and that they are to be lauded in terms of their retention of their righteousness. This treacherous. Let us deal shrewdly with them, with the people of Israel. Let us act shrewdly regarding what to do with them. Our rabbis, however, interpreted the parah said, "Let us deal shrewdly with the Savior Israel, as to him by afflicting them to die with water. Whereas he has already sworn that he will not bring a flood to the world." So this passage has a reference to the Messiah figure, which in this story is Moses, and it also alludes to the ongoing commentary in the Bible regarding the flood, because after Noah's flood, God said that He would not bring about another totally destructive flood. And but they, the Egyptians, did not understand that upon the whole world He would not bring a flood; He would bring it upon one nation. So the Egyptians, are underestimating God's aspect of judgment. Let us deal shrewdly with this, afflicting them to die with water. There's a kind of flippancy um, that they forgot water, which in Jungian psychology symbolizes the unconscious, can be a source of divine retribution. Um, and presumably, according to the Bible, the Egyptians were well learned in areas of magic, in areas of divination and sorcery. So this represents a quite flagrant disregard of the order of things, was considered widespread knowledge at the time. And depart from the land against our will. Rabbis, however, depicted Pare as a person who curses himself but ascribes his curse to others. And it is as if it were written, and we will depart from the land and they will take possession. As a person who curses himself but ascribes his curse to others. And we will depart from the land and they will take possession of it. Yeah, this is an intricate verse about a person who curses himself. You find that used euphemistically, but certainly includes me in terms of its meaning. This will be a good place to stop, and they will resume this conversation. Thank you.